As I landed in Utah, the scorching heat of late May hit me like a wave. Leaving the hot airport, I was greeted by the beautiful desert landscape adorned with towering cliffs and vast desert scenery. The sky was clear. I could practically see the stars during the day. In the distance, I could make out the outline of a city. Hurricane. After a long day of traveling, I finally arrived in my hotel room and dropped my bags. It was a small, comfortable room with a queen-sized bed, a small bathroom, and a television. I took a quick, cold shower and flopped onto the bed, but despite my exhaustion, I couldn't fall asleep. Sitting in the room, waiting for my dinner, I realized how hungry I suddenly was. As the room service arrived with my food, I felt my mouth water. The smell of the warm, saucy chicken wings and fresh, salty fries filled the room, making my stomach growl. I dug immediately into the food. The chicken was hot, tender, and juicy, with just the right amount of spice that made me salivate. The fries, crispy on the outside, fluffy on the inside, was a perfect balance to the wings. As I ate, I felt my tiredness disappear and my focus become clearer. The food truly was energizing. I finished my meal, feeling pleasantly full and satisfied. As I relaxed on the bed, feeling the full stomach and happy that my hunger was subsided, thoughts filled my head of all the different things I could do while I was there. As I laid in the hotel bed, my mind was racing with all the possibilities of what I could do on the first day of my vacation in Hurricane, Utah. The city was small, but it had plenty of natural beauty to explore. I knew I wanted to get out and explore, and I was excited to immerse myself in the new surroundings. As I was lying in bed, I suddenly heard people outside my hotel room talking. I couldn't make out the full conversation, but one phrase caught my attention. Joy of Creation House. That piqued my interest as I was a fan of the horror game Five Nights at Freddy's and its fan games. I slowly crept over to the door, trying to listen in on the conversation. It sounded like a group of people were talking about a house in the woods about 6 miles outside of town called the Joy of Creation House, based on the fan game of the same name. My heart thumped with excitement and curiosity. The name of the house instantly made me remember the fan game and how terrifying it was. I couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement about the possibility of exploring the real-life version of the house from the game. As I listened closer to the conversation, I couldn't help but feel a mixture of excitement and worry. The thought of the possibility of the real-life house existing from the game was thrilling, but it also made me think about the ignited animatronics that were part of the game. The thought of those terrifying animatronics roaming around the woods sent a shiver down my spine. As I thought about the ignited animatronics from the game, I realized how dangerous they would be if they were actually real. In the game, they were not only terrifying to look at, but they were also very aggressive, dangerous, and hostile. I couldn't even imagine what it would be like to come face to face with them in person. Despite my worry, my curiosity was getting the best of me. I decided that I wanted to see if the house was actually real, but I knew I would have to bring something to protect myself in case I ran into any of the ignited animatronics that may be there. I knew that if I was going to go and potentially confront the animatronics, I needed some protective gear. I decided that a military outfit would give me some form of protection, but I also knew that obtaining a real military uniform would be impossible without actually being in the military. I began searching for a real-looking costume or a surplus store, looking for an old military uniform that I could wear. I spotted a store across the street from the hotel I was staying at, and to my surprise, it had a collection of old military uniforms. Some of them were obviously costume items for Halloween or other events like games or role plays. I knew this was my chance to find something that looked close enough to a real military uniform for protection. I crossed the street and quickly made my way into the store. The bell jingled as I entered, and the shopkeeper looked up curiously. The place was filled with all kinds of costumes, including an assortment of old military gear. I browsed the racks, looking for something that would look realistic enough. There was an old army helmet on one shelf, some boots that looked like they had been through battle, and some camouflage pants and shirt that looked like they were from the Vietnam era. As I walked further into the store, I noticed some other uniforms and tactical gear that looked much more modern. Alongside those, there were also some uniforms and gear that looked like they were from World War II. The shop seemed to have a variety of different eras and styles, and I knew I had plenty to choose from. I looked at the different options available and decided it would be best to choose a World War II helmet and uniform. I didn't want to accidentally be mistaken as an actual military soldier by wearing more modern attire. The World War II gear seemed like the safest option. I grabbed a helmet and a uniform that looked like it was from the World War II era and found my way to the changing room. I quickly changed and looked at myself in the mirror. I had to admit, it actually looked quite realistic. The helmet, uniform and boots definitely gave me a wartime look. I took a deep breath, feeling a strange mix of excitement and fear as I looked at myself in the mirror. I could pass for a soldier from World War II, and it was both exciting and a little scary to think about the possibility of confronting the ignited animatronics while dressed like this. After I had picked out the World War II helmet and uniform, I also decided to pick up some appropriate weapons. I found a World War II mag machine gun and an M9 pistol that I recognized from the game Call of Duty Ghosts. They were perfect additions to my outfit and would give me some extra protection against the animatronics if I needed it. As I suited up and picked the guns, it reminded me of the airsoft videos I had seen on YouTube, where people would play a shooting game with BB guns that were replicas of real guns. It was reminiscent of laser tag, but with more authentic weapons and costumes, and I recalled seeing a video where someone had dressed up like a World War II soldier, carrying a replica World War II weapon and a replica stick grenade. It was a pretty cool sight. I thought about how fun it would be to play a game like that, all of us dressed up as soldiers and battling each other with BB guns. But then I remembered the real reason I was wearing this World War II gear and what I had to do. I couldn't get distracted by thoughts of playing games. I had a mission to complete. After getting the uniform, the weapons, the boots, and the helmet, I made my purchase and headed out of the shop. The feeling of the equipment and guns heavy on my back was a sobering reminder of the task I had ahead of me. As I crossed the street and made my way back to the hotel, the weight of the equipment and guns on my back served as a constant reminder of why I was doing this. I quickly made my way back to my room and took a deep breath, psyching myself up for what I was about to do. It was only 6 o'clock in the afternoon, giving me a few hours of time before I had to head out on my mission. I could take this time to relax in my hotel room, but the thought of what I was about to face made it difficult to truly unwind. I knew that I had to keep my focus. I couldn't afford to get complacent. With the hours of free time I had, I decided to grab a quick shower and freshen up. The warm water felt good against my skin, and it helped me feel more alert and prepared. As I got out, I couldn't help but think about the mission ahead. I had a few more hours to mentally prepare myself. The more I thought about it, the more apprehensive I felt. I sat on the edge of the bed, the minutes ticking by slowly. I tried to keep my mind occupied, but the thought of my upcoming mission consumed my thoughts. I looked at the clock. The time was crawling by. I had to be at the house by 10 p.m. and it was only 7 o'clock. 3 more hours to wait. I had some time to kill, and my stomach was starting to growl. I decided to order some dinner from room service. I settled on a cheeseburger with ketchup, some chicken tenders, French fries, and a protein salad with a protein shake to balance it out. The order would take a while, but I didn't mind. It would give me something to do while I killed the few hours I had left before I had to set off. I lay on the bed, waiting for my dinner to arrive. The time seemed to drag on, and I couldn't help but glance at the clock every few minutes. The anticipation was starting to eat at me. I just wanted the time to pass by faster. I kept my mind occupied with various things, but all my thoughts kept circling back to my mission. After what felt like an eternity, the room service arrived with my dinner. The smell of the cheeseburger, crispy chicken tenders, and salty French fries filled the room, making my mouth water. I hadn't realized how hungry I was until I saw the food in front of me. I sat down and started to dig into my meal. The food was hot, fresh, and just what I needed. The cheeseburger was juicy and flavorful, the chicken tenders were crispy and tender, and the French fries were perfectly salted. I washed down each bite with sips of my shake to balance out the meal. I finished the meal in no time, and I was pleasantly full. The food had not only satisfied my hunger, but had also taken my mind off the mission for a brief time. I glanced at the clock, and I saw that only an hour had passed. I still had 2 more hours to kill. With an hour still left, I decided to while away the time watching some TV. I flicked through the channels, but nothing really caught my interest. I settled on some random reality show, but I found it hard to pay attention. My mind kept returning to the mission and the danger I was about to face. As the clock struck 10 p.m., a feeling of both dread and excitement washed over me. It was time. With a deep breath, I got up from the bed and checked that I was all equipped. The machine gun, the pistol, the uniform, the helmet, the boots. I was ready. I headed out of the hotel and made my way towards the parking lot. I had rented a Cybertruck from the car rental place at the airport. Surprisingly, it had only cost me 15. I had chosen a green one since I was all about the green, as I had mentioned in one of my EV videos. As I reached the truck, I got in and started the engine. The vehicle rumbled to life, ready to take me to my destination. I navigated the Cybertruck out of the parking lot and onto the main road. The truck felt heavy and powerful as I gripped the wheel, and the adrenaline was already pumping as I drove further away from civilization. I kept driving south, leaving the town behind as the scenery changed from buildings and streetlights to open roads and fields. The silence was only broken by the sound of the tires on the road and the hum of the engine. Every now and then, a lone car would pass by, heading in the opposite direction. The country roads were dark and empty, with only the streetlights to guide my way. I tried to stay focused on the road and not let my mind wander to what I was about to face. I looked out of the windows as I drove, taking in the surroundings. The landscape was open and vast. The darkness of the night made it seem endless. Every now and then I could see farmhouses or barns in the distance, but other than that, there was nothing but emptiness. The only other illumination came from the moonlight, which cast a pale glow on the road and the fields. I couldn't help but feel a sense of eeriness and solitude as I continued driving further away from civilization. After about 15 minutes of driving, the road led into a dense wood. The thick trees and shrubs on either side made it impossible to see very far ahead, and the darkness was even more impenetrable. The only light came from my truck's headlights, creating a narrow tunnel of light through the woods. I kept driving, the path becoming more narrow and windy as I delved deeper into the woods. The trees loomed over the truck, and the shadows danced in the headlights. I stayed alert, scanning the road and the surroundings for any sign of the house or the animatronics. As I continued to drive, I felt a sense of relief knowing that the Cybertruck's strong metal body would withstand any damage or dents if something were to hit it. With its armored exterior and powerful engine, I felt confident that I wouldn't have to worry about any physical damage from the animatronics, even if they were to attack. I kept driving on the main road, which continued through the dense woods. The darkness was all-encompassing, broken only by the beams of the truck's headlights. The only thing I could hear was the hum of the engine and the crunch of the gravel and dirt below the tires, creating an eerie atmosphere. The only thing keeping me company was the light of the moon, which occasionally filtered through the thick foliage. The trees stood tall as if they were watching me, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread as the house was nowhere in sight yet. As I drove further, I noticed a dirt path that veered off to the right from the main road. It was bordered by tall wooden lampposts with lit lamps, giving it a strange old-fashioned feel. The path led deeper into the darkness of the woods. I wondered if the house I was looking for was down that path. It seemed the most likely route, given the isolated area. I made the decision to follow the path and see where it led. I turned onto the path and started driving down it, the truck bouncing over the bumps and potholes in the road. The trees seemed even more ominous now, like they were closing in on me. The only sound was the crunch of gravel under the tires and the occasional hoot of an owl. My heart started beating faster as I drove deeper into the path. The darkness was thicker here, and the only light came from the truck's headlights and the dim glow of the moon. I gripped the wheel tighter, every fibre of my being alert, waiting for the house to appear. The road twisted and turned, making it hard to see far ahead. I could barely make out the shapes of trees and bushes on either side, their shadows moving in the beams of the headlights. I tried to keep my focus on the path, my mind wandering towards the possibility of the animatronics being hidden in the shadows. After a tense 13 minutes, I finally spotted it. A large, ominous house suddenly loomed into view, its silhouette black against the night sky. My heart skipped a beat as I took in the sight before me. I recognized the house immediately from the game. It was the Joy of Creation house. The house looked like a typical suburban home, which was out of place in the middle of the woods. Even more off-putting was how new and fresh it looked, like it had just been built. It was a stark contrast to the surrounding woods and trees that looked old and decrepit. The house had white paint on its exterior and looked brand new, almost like it had been recently repaired. It was a 2-story suburban house that looked out of place in the woods. The thought of the house being in such good condition gave me pause. Why would something in a remote location look as good as it did? I grabbed the World War II mag machine gun and M9 pistol and loaded them before getting out of the truck. As I approached the house, the silence and solitude of the woods gave me an eerie sense of unease. The only sound was the crunch of gravel under my feet and my own breathing. The house stood tall before me, its white paint glowing slightly in the light of the full moon. All the windows were dark and there was no sign of movement or life inside. I stepped onto the porch, my heart pounding in my chest, and approached the front door. I gripped the M9 pistol tightly and reached out to grab the doorknob. It turned out to be unlocked, which only heightened my sense of dread. I pushed the door open, revealing a dimly lit hallway. The hall was illuminated by 3 sconce lamps, one just inside the door and 2 more on the wall around a corner. There was also a little radio on a shelf playing some slow jazz, like it was from the 1950s. The music seemed out of place in the eerie silence of the house. I stepped into the hall, pistol held loosely in my hand, and listened to the jazzy tune coming from the radio. The only other sound was the creaking of the old wooden floorboards under my feet. I clutched the gun tighter as I walked through another door into a hallway. The hallway was dimly lit, and I could hear the creaking of the floorboards with every step. I tried to move quietly, not knowing what awaited me in the main part of the house. The hallway was dark. The only source of illumination was the dim glow of the sconce lamps. I could barely see my hand in front of my face, and the shadows cast by the lamp looked eerie and ominous. I turned on the flashlight on my pistol, the beam of light cutting through the thick darkness of the hall. I could see dust particles dancing in the light and old paintings on the wall, but nothing else. I walked down different halls, my footsteps echoing in the silence. Finally, I reached a double doorway, the door slightly ajar. The darkness behind the doors was almost impenetrable, and the silence was deafening. I pushed the double doors open, the old hinges creaking as they did. I stepped into a small living room, and as I looked around, I noticed there was a door on the left and another on the right. The room was tidy and clean, as if someone had been cleaning recently. I noticed the television was filled with static, the white noise filling the otherwise still room. I glanced around the room, taking in the details. There was a couch, coffee table, and a small bookshelf, all in good condition, along with a few houseplants that looked freshly watered. Suddenly, a terrifying groan echoed through the room, sending a chill down my spine. My heart skipped a beat, and I whirled around trying to pinpoint the source of the noise. The silence that followed was even more unsettling. I quickly pressed my eye to the keyhole of the double doors and saw ignited Bonnie standing in the distance. My heart lurched in my chest as I realized he must have been the one that made the noise. I turned on the television and saw 2 video feeds, one blue and labelled Freddy, the other red and labelled Foxy. My heart raced as I realized that Freddy was likely to come through the door on the right and Foxy through the left. I readied my weapons, preparing myself for a fight. I took cover behind the couch, trying to keep my cool. I didn't know when Freddy and Foxy would enter, so I had to stay alert and focused. Not only was I ready for Freddy and Foxy's potential entrance through the doors, I was also wary of the possibility of Bonnie suddenly appearing through the double doors. The tension was palpable as I waited for the animatronics to make their move. I kept my eye on the TV, watching intently for any sign of movement from the animatronics. The tension was building, and I found myself clenching the guns tighter in my hands as I waited for either Freddy or Foxy to make their entrance. I caught a glimpse of movement on the TV, and saw that Foxy was getting close to the left door. I quickly got up from my hiding place behind the couch and took aim in the direction of the left door, preparing to open fire when Foxy came lunging in to attack. My heart was thumping wildly in my chest as I waited for the door to burst open. I could hear my own breathing. The tension was so high. I gripped the gun tightly, my finger on the trigger, ready to pull it when the animatronic appeared. Without warning, the door burst open, and Foxy lunged into the room, letting out a shrill screech when he spotted me. His metal body gleamed in the dim light, the hooks on his hands sharp and menacing. As Foxy lunged towards me, I opened fire, the bullets tearing through his metallic body. Sparks flew as he stumbled and fell to the ground, twitching and jerking as the bullets had hit their target. The sound of my pistol echoed loudly in the room, and the sharp smell of gunpowder hung in the air. The room was filled with an eerie silence as I took a few steps closer to Foxy's motionless body. I cautiously approached Foxy, keeping my gun trained on him in case he was still active. The animatronic lay motionless on the ground, its metal limbs twisted and broken. I gingerly prodded him with the barrel of my pistol, but there was no reaction. My heart was still racing from the encounter with Foxy, but I quickly regained my composure and refocused my attention on the TV. I needed to make sure I knew when Freddy was coming, so I could be ready for him. I watched the TV intently, and my heart rate spiked again as I saw Freddy continuing to walk. The animatronic's movements were slow and calculated, and he definitely was making his way towards this room. The suspense was killing me as I watched Freddy inch closer towards the room. I gripped my guns tighter, my mind racing as I tried to decide on the best course of action for when he entered. Suddenly, the door swung open and Freddy appeared in the doorway. The suddenness of it all made me jump, but I quickly composed myself and took aim at the animatronic. Freddy just stood in the doorway for a moment, his cold animatronic gaze seemingly fixed on me. As Freddy roared and took a step forward, I opened fire, aiming right for his metal chest. The bullet slammed into Freddy, causing him to jerk and stumble, sparks flying everywhere as the metal casing of his body took the impact. The sound of my gunfire echoed through the room, almost deafening me for a moment. I watched as Freddy shuddered and sparks flew, a clear sign that I had landed a few good shots. I took a few steps closer to Freddy, wanting to get a better look at the damage I had inflicted upon him. The animatronic was twitching and jerking, some of his internal parts sticking out and sparking. I reached out, my hand shaking slightly, and prodded him with the barrel of my gun. He was still moving, but it was more like an involuntary spasm now, rather than a calculated attack. With Freddy now powered down, I turned my attention to Bonnie. I knew he would be coming through the double doors soon, and I wanted to be prepared for when he arrived. My heart was still racing from the encounter with Freddy, but I tried to calm myself down as I waited for Bonnie to appear. I knew I had a few minutes until he would barge in, so I took the time to reload my pistols and take a few deep breaths. As I prepared for the arrival of Bonnie, I decided to use the mag machine gun on him rather than my pistols. Bonnie was a strong animatronic, and I figured the machine gun would give me a better chance against him. I checked the ammunition in the machine gun, making sure I had enough rounds to deal with Bonnie. The room was silent, the only sound being my own heart beating loudly in my chest. The silence was almost unbearably tense. I knew that at any moment, Bonnie could appear at the doors. My heart was pounding, and I could feel a bead of sweat trickling down my forehead. I kept my eyes glued to the door, my knuckles turning white from grasping the machine gun so tightly. Every creak and groan of the floorboards made me flinch, and I found myself jumping at every little sound. Suddenly, Bonnie burst through the double doors with another terrifying screech. His metal body gleamed as he charged towards me. I could see that Bonnie's face, as well as his right arm and a part of his suit around his torso, were missing. It gave him a sinister and eerie appearance, like a terrifying combination of animatronic and exposed metal and wires. I aimed at Bonnie and opened fire, the machine gun roaring to life. Bullets tore through Bonnie's metal frame, sparks and metal fragments flying everywhere. The room was filled with the sound of gunfire as I continued to fire upon Bonnie. I could see sparks flying and small pieces of metal breaking off of his body as the bullets made their impact. I kept firing, the recoil of the machine gun jolting my body with each bullet that was shot. Bonnie's movements became more erratic, his metallic body jerking and twitching under the onslaught of bullets. After a few more seconds of firing, Bonnie finally collapsed onto the floor, his body motionless and sparking. I took a few steps closer to check if he was truly offline. I approached Bonnie's body cautiously, my heart still racing from the fight. The animatronic was lying motionless on the floor, its metal body smoking and sparking. I prodded him with the barrel of my gun, but there was no reaction. I took a moment to take a few deep breaths, trying to calm myself down after the adrenaline rush from the fight with Bonnie. Once my heart rate had slowed to a more normal pace, I walked through the right door to continue exploring the house. As I walked through the room, I noticed that I hadn't encountered Chica yet, which was strange. All the other animatronics had appeared, but there was no sign of her. I wondered if the sound of the gunfire had scared Chica away, which would explain why she hadn't appeared. I kept my guard up anyway, not wanting to take any chances with these animatronic. I continued down the corridor, my footsteps echoing in the silent house. The dim light cast long, eerie shadows on the wall, giving the narrow hallway an even more sinister atmosphere. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, and every little noise made me jump. The silence was oppressive, and I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. I continued to walk slowly and cautiously, my eyes constantly scanning the surroundings for any sign of Chica or any other threat. The house seemed to be bigger than I had originally thought. I turned a corner and suddenly saw an office up ahead. The office door was ajar, and a little light was streaming out of it. I approached the office cautiously, not sure what to expect to find inside. I entered the office through the double doors and noticed a desk in the center of the room, complete with 3 monitors. The light from the screens cast a bluish glow around the room, making everything look a bit surreal. I walked closer to the desk and looked at the monitors. They were all displaying different camera feeds, each showing different parts of the house. I analyzed the monitors, each one displaying a different camera feed. The monitor on the right showed the camera feed outside the house. The one in the middle showed the corridor outside the double doors I had just come through, and the monitor on the left showed the camera feed in a closet. I couldn't help but wonder why there was a camera feed in a closet. What could possibly be hiding in there? I felt a chill run down my spine at the thought. I looked closer at the monitor on the left, taking in every detail of the camera feed. The closet was dark, and the only thing I could see inside was a single chair and some boxes. I took a seat at the computer, feeling a wave of exhaustion wash over me. After the fight with the animatronics, I needed to take a few moments to rest and compose myself. I took a drink of water from my bottle, relishing the cool liquid as it slid down my throat. As I sat there, I couldn't help but feel a bit uneasy. The silence in the room was almost oppressive, and I half expected one of the animatronics to burst in at any moment. Nonetheless, I took a few more deep breaths and tried to relax my tensed muscles. The computer monitor was still displaying the camera feed from the closet, and I tried to make sense of it all. Why was there a camera feed in a closet, and what was the purpose of the chair and boxes? I was still contemplating the purpose of the camera in the closet when suddenly, all 3 monitors filled with dramatic static. A message appeared on the screen reading, "Watch out for the fallen," before changing back to the camera feeds. My heart skipped a beat as I read the ominous message on the screen. Who or what was the fallen? Was it another animatronic that I had yet to encounter? I sat there, my heart beating fast as I tried to make sense of the message. Was the fallen a machine? A ghost? A figment of my imagination? I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that settled in my stomach. After seeing the message on the screen, I made sure that my weapons were fully reloaded, just in case I had to face the mysterious fallen. I double-checked my mag machine gun and M9 pistol, making sure they were ready to go at a moment's notice. I returned my attention to the camera feeds, intently watching them for any sign of the fallen. The house was still and silent, and I found myself holding my breath as I waited for something to happen. Every little sound, from the creaking of the floorboards to the hum of the computer, seemed amplified in the stillness of the room. I kept my eyes glued to the monitors, determined to spot the fallen before it could find me. I continued to watch the monitors for several minutes, but everything seemed just as before. Suddenly, something caught my eye in the monitor displaying the hallway. An endoskeleton had appeared, standing motionless in the middle of the hall. Closer inspection of the endoskeleton revealed that it was missing its lower arms, giving the already eerie animatronic a more menacing and unsettling appearance. The endoskeleton suddenly sprinted up to the door, the sound of its metal feet clanging on the floor. It let out a high-pitched screech, its black, lifeless eyes seeming to fix on the camera. The sound of the screeching filled the room, and I had to resist the urge to cover my ears. The endoskeleton then started banging on the door, the loud thuds echoing through the silent house. I quickly reached for my mag machine gun, my heart racing at the sight of the endoskeleton pounding on the door. Whatever this thing was, it was strong and aggressive, and I needed to be prepared for a fight. I aimed the mag at the door, my finger hovering over the trigger. The banging grew louder and more violent as the endoskeleton continued to try and break through the door. The door shook with each impact from the endoskeleton's pounding fists, and I knew it wouldn't hold much longer. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for whatever was about to happen. The door was suddenly kicked open, and the endoskeleton burst into the room. I barely had time to react, but I quickly fired my gun. The bullets tore into the endoskeleton, causing it to stagger momentarily. The endoskeleton seemed momentarily stunned by the force of the bullets, but it quickly recovered and started charging towards me, its empty eyes locked on me. I aimed my gun at the endoskeleton's face and fired again, hoping to incapacitate it. The bullets hit their mark, causing the endoskeleton to jerk back and stumble. The endoskeleton stumbled and fell to the ground, its metallic body hitting the floor with a heavy thump. It lay there motionless, sparks flying from its injured body. I couldn't help but wonder if the endoskeleton belonged to Chica, as I had yet to encounter her during my exploration of the house. But this type of endoskeleton seemed to match Chica's design. I approached the endoskeleton, taking a closer look at its damaged body. The missing arms, combined with the pinkish-red tones of its metal, seemed to confirm my suspicions that it was indeed Chica's endoskeleton. I returned to the desk and once again focused on the monitors, searching the camera feeds for any signs of additional enemies. I scanned the feeds, paying close attention to any movement or changes in the different rooms. So far, the house seemed quiet, but I knew I couldn't let my guard down yet. Another endoskeleton appeared on one of the monitors, this one in the closet. Its design was drastically different from the previous one, featuring only one eye, fox ears, and wires where its arms should have been. This was not the same endoskeleton as Chica's, and I couldn't help but feel uneasy watching it. I took in the appearance of the new endoskeleton and couldn't shake the feeling that this must be Foxy's endo. The one eye, the fox ears, and the wires for arms all seemed to line up with his design. However, I couldn't help but wonder what this endoskeleton was doing in the closet. It was just standing there, looking almost stationary, but the feeling of unease it gave me was undeniable. The endoskeleton suddenly darted towards the door, letting out a shrill scream as it approached. It crashed into the door, its face hitting the surface with a loud thump. The endoskeleton continued its assault on the door, slamming its head against it repeatedly. The thump of its impacts filled the room, and I could see the door beginning to buckle under the force. I watched the monitor, my muscles tensing as I prepared myself to shoot the endoskeleton. Its constant barrage against the door was beginning to take its toll, and it was only a matter of time before the door would give way. The endoskeleton continued to slam its head against the door, each impact sounding louder and more intense than the last. The door was shaking with every hit, and I knew I had to incapacitate the endoskeleton before it could burst through. As soon as the door gave way, I fired my gun, the bullets ripping into the endoskeleton. It collapsed to the ground, sparks flying from its damaged body as it went offline. Once I was sure the endoskeleton was down, I quickly shut the door, hoping to prevent any more surprises from following it into the room. The room was once again silent, and I took a moment to catch my breath. The encounters with the endoskeletons had been intense, and I wasn't sure if there were any more waiting for me in the house. I went back to watching the cameras, my eyes darting from one monitor to the next as I searched for any movement or activity. The house was eerily quiet, and I could feel the tension building in the room. Every little noise or shadow on the monitors made me jump, my nerves on edge after the last two encounters. I continued to scrutinize the feeds, determined to spot any potential threats before they could surprise me. Despite the passing minutes without any further signs of movement, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I glanced around the room nervously, half expecting something to jump out at me from the shadows. Another endoskeleton appeared on the monitors, this time outside the window entrance. It was different from the other endos I had encountered so far, missing an ear and having eyes and a bear-shaped ear. I realized this was likely Freddy's endoskeleton, based on the distinctive appearance. The endoskeleton stood motionless outside the window, staring through the glass and seemingly scanning the room. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching me, its empty eye sockets fixated on me through the camera feed. The endoskeleton suddenly let out a loud scream, its empty eye sockets staring directly at the camera. The screech filled the room, and I instinctively took a step back from the monitors, my heart racing. The sound of the endoskeleton's scream echoed in my ears, and I could feel a chill run down my spine. I continued to watch the monitor, keeping a close eye on the endoskeleton's position outside the window. The endoskeleton continued to stand motionless outside the window, but I could feel its eyes watching me through the cameras. I noticed the endoskeleton start to pry open the window, its metallic fingers grasping the edges and attempting to force it open. I quickly readied my weapon, preparing myself for another fight. The window creaked loudly as the endoskeleton continued to pry it open, the sound of metal scraping against wood echoing through the room. I could feel my heart racing as I waited for the window to give way, my finger on the trigger of my gun. The window suddenly gave way under the endoskeleton's strength, and it quickly climbed through the opening, its metallic body moving with alarming speed. The endoskeleton jumped into the room, its heavy footsteps clunking against the floor as it approached. I took a few steps back, my gun raised and ready to fire. I fired my gun at the endoskeleton's face, the bullets tearing into its metal exoskeleton. The endoskeleton stumbled back, sparks flying from its damaged body. The gunshots echoed through the room as the endoskeleton staggered, its metallic body taking the brunt of the impact. It let out a high-pitched screech, the sound filled with rage and pain. I took aim again and fired at the endoskeleton's head, determined to immobilize it. The bullets ripped through its head, causing it to twitch and convulse as the damage began to take its toll. The endoskeleton's body jerked and glitched as the bullets continued to tear through it. Sparks flew from its damaged head, and I could tell it was close to shutting down completely. I kept firing, determined to put an end to this endoskeleton. It stumbled backwards, its metallic limbs twitching uncontrollably as the damage became too much for it to handle. The endoskeleton's movements grew more erratic, its body lurching forward almost like a puppet on a string. It stumbled back, its eyes flickering on and off as its systems started to fail. The endoskeleton finally collapsed to the ground, the impact causing a loud thud to fill the room. It lay motionless on the floor, sparks flying from the various places where my shots had torn into its frame. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I had been holding, my heart still racing from the adrenaline of the fight. I approached the endoskeleton's motionless body, making sure it was truly neutralized. I returned to the cameras, feeling a mix of relief and unease after the encounter with the endoskeleton. I couldn't help but wonder if there were more of them lurking around the house, waiting to attack. I noticed the camera feeds had suddenly changed, and my heart skipped a beat as I tried to make sense of the new images. The house looked the same as before, but something was off. I looked more closely at the monitors, taking in the different parts of the house that were now visible. My eyes were drawn to the middle monitor, which showed an upstairs door. The door appeared to be closed, but the image on the camera feed sent a shiver down my spine. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but something about the door seemed ominous and foreboding. I continued to stare at the monitor, my mind racing with thoughts of what could be behind the door. The house was already filled with strange and dangerous animatronics. I was reluctant to face what might be waiting for me behind that door. I jumped as I noticed the door on the monitor begin to rattle, the sound of the door shaking filling the room. My heart started to race as I tried to understand what was causing the commotion. The rattling grew louder and more violent, the door trembling as if something was trying desperately to get through. I felt a chill run down my spine as I wondered what could be behind that door. The door burst open with an ear-piercing screech, and an endoskeleton with glowing red eyes and only one arm emerged from the other side. It looked unlike the others I had encountered before, its appearance more menacing and ominous. I realized with a jolt that this endoskeleton had to be Bonnie's. It was missing its right arm, a feature that was identical to the damage that Bonnie himself sustained. The endoskeleton let out a deafening roar before sprinting off screen, moving at an alarmingly fast pace. I knew instantly that this endoskeleton was going to be much faster and more difficult to take down than the others. The sound of its heavy footsteps echoed through the house, and I could only imagine the havoc it was causing as it darted through the rooms. I had to act fast if I wanted to stop it before it caused more damage. I got my gun ready, my heart pounding in my chest as I prepared myself for another battle. The endoskeleton with red eyes had been faster and more aggressive than the others, and I knew that taking it down wouldn't be easy. I could feel my adrenaline pumping as I realized that the endoskeleton with red eyes was heading straight for the office. I took a deep breath and braced myself, ready to face it head on. The sound of its footsteps grew closer and closer, and I could hear it slamming into walls as it raced through the house, moving frighteningly fast. It was only a matter of time before it reached the office door. I gripped my gun tighter, my knuckles turning white from the force of my grip. I was ready to face this endoskeleton head on, but a part of me was terrified of what would happen when it burst through the door. The footsteps were thundering closer now, and I could hear the sound of the endoskeleton's metallic body slamming into walls and other objects as it charged towards the door. It was close, and I knew it was only seconds away from breaking through the door and attacking. I mentally counted down the seconds, waiting for the inevitable moment when the door would be smashed open and the endoskeleton would come barreling into the room. The moments stretched out endlessly, each second feeling like an eternity. The footsteps echoed through the house, growing louder and more intense as the endoskeleton neared. It honestly sounded like a train barreling through the building, and the sound made my heart race even faster. The footsteps were so loud now that it was almost deafening, making my head throb with the sound. The endoskeleton was getting closer and closer, and I knew that the moment of truth was just seconds away. The endoskeleton crashed through the double doors to the office, the impact sending splinters of wood flying in all directions. The creature stood in the doorway, its red eyes glowing malevolently as it scanned the room for me. I fired my gun at its head, the bullets ripping into its metallic frame. The endoskeleton stumbled back, shaken by the impact, but it quickly recovered and started charging at me. I shot the endoskeleton again, firing shot after shot into its body until it collapsed to the ground. The creature lay motionless on the floor, sparks flying from its damaged exoskeleton as its systems began to shut down. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I had been holding. I had finally taken down the endoskeleton with red eyes, but I knew this wouldn't be the last fight I'd have with these creatures. I stood in the now silent room, my heart still racing from the intense battle. I knew I had to be constantly vigilant. There was no telling what other dangers lay waiting in this cursed house. I was shocked as the camera monitors suddenly went to static, and a new message appeared. Creation is coming. The words sent a chill down my spine, the ominous message leaving me with a feeling of dread and uncertainty. I stared at the message, trying to make sense of its meaning. Who or what was creation, and what did it mean that it was coming? I had a feeling that I wasn't going to like the answer. My phone suddenly beeped, interrupting my thoughts. There was a weather alert on the screen informing me that the storm outside was getting worse. The message warned that I had to get out now and head back to the hotel. I knew I had to heed the warning. Staying in the house any longer risked getting stuck in the storm and potentially encountering more of those endoskeletons. I had to get out as quickly and safely as possible. I grabbed my weapon and bolted out of the office, adrenaline coursing through my veins as I ran down the corridor. The storm outside was getting stronger by the minute, the sound of the wind and rain battering against the exterior of the house growing louder with each step. I reached the living room and kicked through the double doors, the force propelling me into the halls. The wind was stronger here, howling through the windows and causing the lights to flicker intermittently. I dashed down the hall, the once familiar surroundings now made eerie and menacing by the dim lighting and shadows caused by the storm outside. The sound of the storm echoed through the corridors, the wind howling through the windows and the rain pelting against the walls. I came to a halt when I saw a massive animatronic approaching me. It had 4 arms, with one of them resembling Foxy's hook, and its head resembled a different version of Freddy. The most striking feature, however, were its glowing red eyes, giving it a menacing and threatening aura. My mind raced as I looked at this massive animatronic, realization dawning on me. This was Creation, the entity mentioned in the message. Its size and appearance were nothing like the endoskeletons or the other animatronics I had encountered so far. I pieced together the clues before me. Creation was likely the result of all the parts of the animatronics forming a single entity. The combined power and ferocity of every individual animatronic would indeed create a super vicious and deadly creature. With Creation charging towards me, I quickly turned and dashed away, my feet pounding against the floor as I ran for my life. The adrenaline was pumping through my veins, and I could hear Creation's heavy footsteps closing the distance between us as it pursued me down the hall. The storm outside picked up in intensity, the sound of the howling wind and beating rain creating an atmosphere of intense desperation. I kept running, dodging corners and avoiding obstacles as I tried to put as much distance between myself and Creation as possible. I glanced back over my shoulder momentarily, seeing Creation's massive form closing in on me. Its red eyes glowed with a sinister light, and its metallic limbs moved with alarming speed. I pushed myself to move even faster. I could hear the sound of Creation's breathing as it followed me, its panting and growling filling the halls. I knew I couldn't outrun it for much longer. I had to find a way to lose it, or find somewhere to hide. I turned down a hallway after widening the distance between me and Creation. The new hallway was dark and dimly lit, with a few flickering lights casting ominous shadows on the walls. I slowed my pace slightly, trying to catch my breath as I looked around for a room to hide in. As I glanced around, I noticed a piece of paper on the wall. It was a worn and tattered piece of paper, almost as if it had been hung up there for a long time. Curious, I moved closer to it to try and read what it said. As I read the paper, my mind registered the words, "Collect 5 objects within 1 minute." I thought it must be a joke. There was no way I could collect 5 objects in just a minute, especially not with Creation on my tail. I knew I couldn't waste time pursuing this crazy task. The storm outside was intensifying, its thunder and lightning becoming more frequent and ominous. I needed to cut my losses and get out of the house, back to the hotel, as quickly as possible. I picked up my pace again, scouring the halls for the door that led back to the corridor with the radio. The sound of Creation's heavy footsteps was still close behind me, the creature's relentless pursuit filling me with panic and adrenaline. I turned another corner and finally spotted the door I was looking for. Breathing a sigh of relief, I pushed open the door and rushed into the corridor, my heart pounding in my chest. I kicked open the front door, the howling wind and rain hitting me like a wall as I stepped outside into the storm. I could see my Cybertruck parked in the distance, my destination in sight. My heart pounded in my chest as I raced towards the truck, the rain soaking me through in seconds. I sprinted through the rain, my clothes drenched within moments. I reached the Cybertruck and hurriedly opened the door, jumping into the cab. Safely inside, I quickly turned on the ignition and started the engine. I navigated the Cybertruck carefully, making a U-turn and driving back along the path towards the main road. The storm outside made visibility difficult, the rain coming down in sheets and the lightning illuminating the night sky. I strained to see through the storm, gripping the steering wheel tightly as I navigated the winding path. The road was slick with rain, and the wind was buffeting the Cybertruck fiercely. I had to get back to the hotel, fast. I floored the accelerator, pushing the Cybertruck to its limits as I maneuvered the vehicle through the storm-lashed landscape. The rain was relentless, lashing against the windshield and obscuring my vision, but I kept driving, my focus solely on reaching the hotel safely. I finally reached the main road, the Cybertruck's tires hitting the blacktop with a screech. I let out a sigh of relief, but knew I wasn't out of the woods yet. The storm was ferocious, and the drive back was going to be treacherous. I spun the wheel, turning the Cybertruck north. The headlights pierced the darkness ahead, carving through the rain and wind. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, my knuckles white with tension as I focused on the road. The storm raged around me, the thunder and lightning creating a chaotic and dangerous backdrop for my journey. I felt the cab of the Cybertruck shudder and vibrate from the force of the storm, but I kept my foot on the gas, driving onward towards the hotel. As As I drove, I kept a close eye on the trees on either side of the road. The storm was making them sway violently, their branches smacking against each other in the fierce winds. I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread as I kept driving through these treacherous woods. As I navigated the Cybertruck through the treacherous woods, I felt a sense of gratitude for having rented the vehicle. The storm was intense, and I knew that driving a regular car would have been much more difficult in these conditions. With the Cybertruck, I at least had a chance of making it to the hotel safely. As I continued driving, I kept a vigilant watch on the trees on either side of the road. The storm was still raging, and the trees were whipping around wildly, their branches lashing out menacingly. I tried to ignore the foreboding feeling in my gut as I pressed on towards the hotel. In the rearview mirror, a terrifying sight met my eyes. Creation was visible behind the Cybertruck, its massive form running swiftly through the forest, easily keeping pace with the vehicle. My heart skipped a beat from the shock and fear that seized me upon seeing Creation gaining on me. I had thought I had escaped its pursuit, but it was more relentless than I had imagined, and was now closing the distance between us. I floored the accelerator once more, the Cybertruck's engine roaring as I tried to speed up. The storm was making the road slippery, and the trees on either side provided little protection from the fierce winds. I had to think fast and come up with a plan to lose Creation somehow. I pushed the accelerator even harder, the Cybertruck's engine revving loudly as I tried to increase my speed. The car started to pull ahead, distancing itself slightly from Creation, but it wasn't enough. I could see its red eyes in the rearview mirror, still steadily gaining ground. Despite my best efforts to outpace Creation, the massive animatronic was remarkably agile and fast. It kept up with the Cybertruck, its legs moving in long strides that covered the ground with surprising speed. I quickly set the Cybertruck to autopilot, allowing it to continue moving forward while I focused my attention on Creation. Leaning out the window, I took aim and fired at the animatronic, hoping to slow it down or at least buy me some time. The bullets hit Creation, the impact causing sparks and fragments to fly as the rounds made contact with its metal frame. It stumbled slightly, its stride momentarily broken, but it quickly regained its footing and continued its relentless pursuit. I fired again, sending another hail of bullets toward Creation. Again, the rounds found their mark, and the animatronic stumbled once more, but it proved to be a momentary victory, as it righted itself and resumed the chase, undeterred by the damage I had inflicted. I quickly reloaded my gun, my hands moving almost automatically from the countless times I had performed this action. Once the gun was loaded, I leaned out the window once more, taking aim and firing another round of shots at Creation. The bullets tore through the air, hitting Creation again and again. Each impact caused the animatronic to stumble and falter, its massive form lurching and staggering as the rounds dug into its metal frame. But despite the damage I was causing, Creation kept coming, its glowing eyes fixed on me with a single-minded determination. It was as if no amount of damage could truly stop this monstrous entity. I quickly reloaded my gun once more and took aim at Creation's face, hoping there was a weakness I could exploit. As I fired, the bullets hit the animatronic in the face, and shockingly it jerked back, stumbled, and even let out a short, distorted scream. It seemed that Creation's face was indeed its weak spot, as it was now reeling back from the impact of my shots. Taking advantage of this newfound knowledge, I continued firing at Creation's face, hoping to slow it down even further. Each bullet that struck its face caused the massive animatronic to reel and stumble, its movements becoming more unsteady and disoriented. It was clear that the face was where the bulk of its sensors or vital systems must be located. As I continued to fire on Creation's face, it staggered back further, its movements becoming more sluggish and labored. It seemed disoriented and injured now, its steps falling out of rhythm as it struggled to continue its pursuit. I took aim at Creation's face once more, and with a final, well-aimed shot, I was rewarded with the sight of it going down for good. It collapsed to the ground, its massive frame lying still and lifeless. I pulled myself back into the cab, my breathing heavy and adrenaline still pumping through me. I took a moment to compose myself, my hands still shaking slightly from the intense chase and battle. But now, with Creation neutralized, I had a chance to drive back to the hotel in relative safety. the Cybertruck drove out of the woods and into the open, rolling fields that bordered the forest. The storm was still raging around me, the rain and wind battering the vehicle and making the journey treacherous. I kept my eyes peeled as I navigated the Cybertruck through the fields. The storm made visibility poor, and I had to be vigilant to avoid any downed trees or other debris that could pose a danger. Every time lightning lit up the sky, my heart skipped a beat, expecting to see something sinister in the shadows. The sound of the wind and rain beating against the cabin of the Cybertruck was almost overwhelming. I could feel the vehicle shudder and lurch as it made its way through the uneven terrain. I longed for the safe haven of the hotel, as every mile seemed to stretch further. As I continued driving, my heart hammering in my chest and adrenaline still coursing through me, I suddenly noticed a gnawing feeling in my stomach. I hadn't realized it before, but I was incredibly hungry. The stress and exhaustion from the events over the last few hours had made me famished. I realized that finding food at this hour, with the storm raging outside, might be a problem. Restaurants and stores would likely be closed, and driving around aimlessly in the storm didn't seem like a wise idea. My stomach rumbled, protesting my decision not to bring snacks. As I continued my journey, the hunger gnawing at my stomach, I suddenly spotted a small burger joint on the side of the road that was miraculously still open. The lights were still burning, and the sign on the building proclaimed it to be open. I couldn't believe my luck. I pulled into the drive-thru and placed my order. 4 cheeseburgers, 4 fries, 5 wings, and 8 salads, along with 8 protein shakes to balance out the meal. Surprisingly, the cost was only 5, a deal that seemed too good to be true. I handed over the money and watched as the employee prepared my order. The burger joint employees worked quickly, finishing my order in no time. I could see the urgency in their eyes, likely due to the storm that was still raging outside. As they handed me the large bag of food, I thanked them and gunned the engine once more, continuing on my way to the hotel. The smell of the burgers and fries in the cabin of the Cybertruck was both tantalizing and torture. My stomach rumbled more emphatically, begging for me to stop the vehicle and chow down. But I resisted the urge, knowing I had to get back to the hotel first. I pulled up to the hotel, the neon sign blinking vacancy in the storm. The parking lot was nearly deserted, just a few other cars scattered among the empty spots. I parked the Cybertruck, breathing a sigh of relief to be back in the relative safety of civilization again. The rain was still coming down hard, pounding against the cab of the Cybertruck. I sat there for a moment, taking a few breaths to calm my racing heart. Then, grabbing the huge bag of food, I braced myself for the dash from the vehicle to the hotel entrance. I lunged out of the cab, clutching the bag of food tightly, and dashed towards the hotel entrance. The wind and rain lashed at me, making the brief run across the parking lot feel like a marathon. Once inside, I breathed a sigh of relief and quickly made my way down the hall towards my room. The lights inside the hotel seemed even warmer and more inviting after the chaotic storm outside. I finally reached my room and quickly unlocked the door, stepping inside and shutting the door behind me. I could hear the rain lashing against the windows, the sound of the storm outside contrasting sharply with the quiet safety of my room. I set the bag of food down on the small table, the smell of the greasy burgers and salty fries filling the room. My stomach growled again, reminding me of how hungry I really was. I grabbed one of the cheeseburgers and practically shoved it into my mouth, the flavor and feeling of finally being able to eat making me feel like I just won the lottery. I sat there, tearing through the greasy food as if I hadn't eaten in days. I finished one cheeseburger and moved on to the next, the salty fries an excellent companion. After a few moments I had wolfed down half the bag's contents. My hunger and the stress of the night finally quelled. I sat back, feeling more human again. I savored the last few bites of my third cheeseburger, the grease and cheese working their magic as I washed it down with sips of a protein shake. The storm was still outside, the rain continuing to fall against the window, but for now, I was warm and safe, my hunger satisfied, and adrenaline finally fading. With 3 burgers and some fries already gone, I decided that indulging in the rest would be overkill. I packed up the leftovers and placed them in the mini fridge, vowing to save some for breakfast. I sat back, feeling a mix of exhaustion and relief. The night had been one disaster after another, and I was ready for some quiet. I headed into the bathroom and turned on the shower, feeling every muscle in my body crying out for a wash. I stood under the hot water, letting it wash away the dirt, sweat, and stress of the night. After a nice long shower, I got out and got ready for bed, sliding under the covers and letting out a weary sigh. The bed felt like an oasis after the trials of the night. It was soft and cool, and as I laid down, I felt my muscles relaxing and my mind beginning to settle. I reached over and turned off the bedside lamp, plunging the room into semi-darkness. As I laid there, my body relaxing and mind winding down, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. I had survived my encounter with creation, the massive and sinister animatronic, and had outwitted it. The feeling was almost euphoric, a sense of victory that was hard to describe. I smiled to myself in the dark, feeling like a warrior who had slain a beast. I had taken on creation, a towering and nearly invincible machine, and managed to defeat it. It was a win that felt even better for having been against the odds. I shouted into the empty room, my voice loud and clear. I defeated creation like a boss! The words echoed off the walls before fading into silence. I felt a rush of triumph and satisfaction as I said it aloud, the reality of my victory sinking in once more. It felt good to use my catchphrase after the adrenaline-fueled fight with creation. It was as if saying it aloud made my actions even more real. I had faced off against one of the most fearsome and dangerous animatronics out there, and had emerged victorious. I drifted off to sleep, my mind swirling with images of the night's events. I was looking forward to sharing the story with my girlfriend Gabby, who was a fellow YouTuber and went by the name Gab Smolders online. I knew she would be amazed, and probably even a little concerned that I had fought with a life-sized animatronic that seemed like it came from a horror movie. As my mind began to quiet, I thought of how I'd recount my story to Gabby. She was used to my adventures and thrill-seeking, but I had a feeling even she would be impressed, and maybe even a little frightened by the events of the night. I couldn't help but smile a little as I fell asleep, imagining her reaction.